Nobody saw this coming, not like this. What started as a quiet, ordinary night suddenly turned into one of the most intense and career-shaking moments in the life of King Harris. And the craziest part, it was all caught on camera. Not just a few seconds, not just a blurry clip. Every moment. Flashing lights cutting through the darkness, raised voices echoing in the background, a level of tension so heavy you could feel it just by watching the screen. And right in the center of it all stood King Harris, face to face with authorities, visibly frustrated, standing his ground, refusing to back down. But this is where things take a turn no one expected. Because the footage that's now going viral isn't just another arrest video. It's something deeper, something that wasn't meant for public eyes. According to insiders, this video was never supposed to be released. Somehow, someway it leaked. And the moment it hit social media, everything exploded. Within minutes, timelines were flooded. Within hours, conversations turned into chaos. Fans were confused, trying to piece together what they were seeing. Critics didn't hold back, jumping to conclusions and forming harsh opinions. And people close to the situation, they weren't just watching, they were panicking. Because this clip doesn't just show an arrest. It shows emotion, it shows tension, it shows something personal unfolding in real time. You can hear voices rising in the background. You can see body language shifting, small movements that signal something bigger happening beneath the surface. And then there's that one moment. The moment people can't stop replaying. A split second where everything looks like it could spiral completely out of control. That's the clip that stuck. But what really has the internet talking is what happens just before things escalate. There's a brief exchange, quick, almost easy to miss, between T.I. and King Harris, and viewers are calling it chilling. Some believe it reveals tension that's been building for months. Others think it exposes a hidden conflict behind the scenes, something fans were never meant to see. And now, one question is spreading across the internet like wildfire. Was this just an unfortunate incident? Or was this the moment everything finally broke? Because sources are starting to hint that what we saw in that video might only be the beginning. And if those whispers turn out to be true, this situation could get a lot more serious. But to really understand why this moment is hitting so hard, you have to go back. Way back. Before the flashing lights. Before the viral footage. Before the arrest that now has everyone talking. You have to understand who T.I. really is. Not just as an artist, but as a figure. For over 2 decades, T.I. has built more than just a music career. He built an identity. He branded himself as the King of the South, a title that represented control, power, and leadership. He wasn't just making music. He was building a legacy. A legacy rooted in turning struggle into success, in transforming chaos into structure, in presenting himself not just as a rapper, but as a man who had everything under control. And a big part of that legacy, his family, especially his son, King Harris. Now, if you've been paying attention, you already know King Harris was never the type to stay quiet or remain in the background. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight, he made one thing clear. He wasn't trying to live in his father's shadow. He wanted his own identity, his own voice, his own respect. But that independence came with a cost. Because the way King chose to express himself didn't always align with the image T.I. had spent years building. And that's where the tension began. Behind the scenes, insiders had already been suggesting for months that things between father and son weren't as smooth as they appeared online. Sure, there were smiles for the cameras, family moments shared on social media, an image of unity presented to the public. But according to those close to them, reality was more complicated. There were disagreements, frequent ones, about lifestyle choices, about behavior, about how things should be handled in public. King Harris, known for speaking his mind without holding back, started making headlines for controversial moments, heated exchanges, statements that sparked debate. And every time it happened, it didn't just affect him. It reflected back on T.I., whether he wanted it to or not. Sources say that started to create real frustration. There were reports of private conversations turning into arguments, of attempts to guide things in a certain direction that didn't always work, of a growing gap between control and independence. And King, he didn't step back. If anything, people say he leaned further into it, posting more, speaking louder, pushing boundaries, almost like he was daring the world, and maybe even his father, to challenge him. Then came the moments that fans couldn't ignore. Clips circulating online showing him speaking aggressively, comments that hinted at deeper frustrations, subtle remarks that some viewers believed were directed at his own situation. Each moment added fuel to the fire. Each moment raised more questions. And slowly, without people fully realizing it, a narrative started forming. Not just about a young man finding his voice, but about a growing tension that was becoming harder to hide. Which brings everything back to that night. That one moment caught on camera. Because when you look at that footage now, it doesn't feel isolated anymore. It feels connected, like a piece of a bigger story that's been building over time. The flashing lights, the confrontation, the emotion, it all hits differently when you understand what might have been happening behind the scenes. And that's why this situation feels so intense. Because it's not just about what happened in that moment. It's about what it represents. A clash between image and reality, between control and independence, between legacy and identity. And now everyone is watching closely, waiting to see what happens next. Will this situation calm down? Or will more details come out that change everything all over again? Because one thing is certain, this isn't just another viral moment. This is something bigger. And it might not be over yet. At first, people didn't think much of it. It looked like something familiar, just another case of father-son tension, the kind of disagreement that happens in private all the time. Nothing unusual, nothing serious. At least, that's what everyone believed in the beginning. But then things started to shift. Because not long before that now-viral arrest footage surfaced, there were already rumors circulating behind the scenes. Quiet whispers suggesting that something major had happened, something serious enough to create a real divide between T.I. and his son, King Harris. No one could confirm exactly what it was. There were no official statements, no clear explanations. But the energy had changed. Fans started noticing it almost immediately. The chemistry between them didn't feel the same anymore. Moments that once felt natural now seemed forced. Interactions that used to feel genuine started to look staged. Something was off, and people could feel it. Then came the moment that really got everyone talking, the live stream. It's the one fans still bring up to this day. During that stream, King Harris appeared visibly irritated. His tone was sharper than usual. His words carried an edge that didn't go unnoticed. Some of the things he said weren't just controversial, they felt personal. Many viewers interpreted his comments as disrespectful, not just toward others, but toward his own family dynamic. And that's when the conversation started to change. Because this wasn't just about attitude anymore. It was about tension. Real tension. Even though T.I. didn't respond publicly at the time, insiders later claimed that behind the scenes, he was far from okay with what happened. In fact, according to sources close to the situation, that livestream triggered a chain reaction, a series of conversations. And with each conversation, things got more intense. Arguments about respect, arguments about image, arguments about boundaries, and most importantly, arguments about control. Because at its core, this situation wasn't just about family disagreements. It was about something bigger. It was about power, about legacy, about who gets to define the narrative. On one side, you had T.I., a man who spent decades building his reputation, carefully shaping his image, and establishing himself as a figure of authority and control. On the other side, you had King Harris, a young man determined to create his own identity, his own voice, and his own path. And according to insiders, neither side was willing to step back. Neither side was willing to compromise. So when that night finally happened, the night of the arrest, it didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't random. It wasn't sudden. It was the boiling point. The moment where all the built-up tension, all the unresolved issues, and all the unspoken frustrations finally erupted. And what makes it even more intense is what witnesses started revealing afterward. Because according to multiple accounts, just hours before the incident, there had already been an argument. Not a small one, a heated one. Voices were raised. Emotions were running high. And if those reports are true, then what we saw in that viral footage wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the aftermath, the result of something much deeper, something personal, something that had been building for a long time. And now, for the first time, the world wasn't just hearing about it. They were watching it unfold in real time. But that leads to the biggest question of all. What actually happened that night? What pushed things from tension into total chaos? Because according to insiders, the night didn't just go wrong. It spiraled. Everything reportedly started in what was supposed to be a low-key situation. Nothing major, nothing dramatic. At least that's how it was meant to be. But that calm didn't last. Witnesses claim that King Harris was already in an agitated state before authorities even arrived. People nearby described his energy as tense, restless, almost like something had already triggered him long before anyone started recording. It was the kind of mood that doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds, and then something happened. No one can seem to agree on the exact trigger, but everyone agrees on what came next. The volume increased. Movements became sharper. And suddenly, what should have been a normal interaction turned into a confrontation. That's when authorities stepped in. At first, it looked routine. Standard procedure. An attempt to calm things down and restore order. Nothing too serious. But then came the moment that changed everything. The moment King Harris pushed back. You can hear it in the footage. That shift in tone. That instant where everything flips from controlled to unpredictable. And once that line is crossed, there's no easy way back. Then, right in the middle of it all, T.I. steps in. And this is where the situation becomes even more intense. Because instead of immediately calming things down like many expected, insiders say T.I. entered the situation already frustrated. Not calm, not composed, frustrated. Almost like this wasn't the first time he had to deal with something like this. Almost like he had reached his limit. And that energy, it clashed instantly with King's. Witnesses describe a moment where the two locked eyes, and for a brief second, everything else seemed to disappear. No crowd, no officers, no noise, just father and son, standing face to face with tension that clearly didn't start that night. It had history, It had weight. And then came the exchange. The moment people can't stop replaying. The moment social media continues to analyze from every angle. King says something low, sharp, difficult to fully make out. T.I. responds immediately. Louder, more direct. And just like that, the situation escalates again. Because now, it's no longer just about the authorities. It's personal. You can feel it. The body language changes. The tone hardens. The atmosphere shifts completely. What started as a controlled situation begins to feel unpredictable. At one point in the footage, it appears that T.I. reaches toward King, not aggressively but firmly. Like he's trying to pull him back, to regain control, to stop things before they get worse. But by that moment, the situation is already on edge, already fragile, and every second feels like it could go either way. That's what makes this moment so powerful, because it's not just about what happened. It's about everything behind it. The tension, the history, the emotions that had been building long before that night ever began. And now the world has seen a glimpse of it. Not the full story, but enough to ask questions, enough to wonder what really led to this point. And most importantly, enough to realize that this might not be the end. It might just be the beginning. Nobody expected it to go this far. What started as a tense, emotional moment quickly turned into something much bigger, something that people are now calling a breaking point in the relationship between T.I. and his son, King Harris. Because right in the middle of that already chaotic situation, when emotions were high and everything felt like it was on edge, King resisted. And that resistance became the moment everything shifted. Up until that point, it looked like a situation that might still be controlled. Authorities were present, voices were raised, but there was still a sense that things could calm down. But the second King pushed back, the entire tone changed. Commands from authorities became louder, sharper, more urgent. Movements became quicker. Hands reached in, and within seconds, what started as tension turned into physical restraint. Both T.I. and King Harris were suddenly being held back, and that's when the footage took a turn no one was prepared for. Amid the noise, the shouting, and the confusion, there was one moment that stood out above everything else. A moment that didn't rely on words. A moment that fans can't stop talking about. T.I. looked directly at his son, and instead of anger, because that's what people expected to see, what many viewers say they saw was something else entirely. Disappointment. Real, visible disappointment. And that single expression changed how people interpreted the entire situation. Because up until then, it looked like just another heated confrontation. But that look made it feel deeper, more personal. Like this wasn't just about what happened that night, but about everything that had been building for months behind the scenes. That's what hit people the hardest. It wasn't the shouting. It wasn't T.I. restraint. It was that silent moment between a father and a son that seemed to carry more weight than anything else in the video. And just when it felt like the situation couldn't get more intense, everything escalated again. Because shortly after the footage went viral, a new piece of content began circulating online, a so-called leaked audio clip. At first, people were skeptical. The internet is full of fake leaks and edited recordings, but this one felt different. The timing alone made it impossible to ignore. According to claims, the audio was recorded earlier that same day, before the incident ever happened. And if that's true, it changes everything. The clip allegedly captures a conversation between T.I. and King Harris. Voices are raised, the tone is tense, and at one point a line is heard, one that has now been repeated across social media countless times. "You keep pushing this, it's not going to end how you think." That single sentence divided the internet almost instantly. Some people heard it as a warning, others heard it as a threat, and some believed it was a desperate attempt to stop things from spiraling out of control. But no matter how people interpreted it, one thing became clear. If that audio is real, then what happened that night wasn't random. It wasn't sudden. It was building. It was inevitable. And just like that, the narrative shifted. This wasn't just about a viral arrest anymore. This became a story about a father and son on a collision course, two individuals moving in directions that were always going to clash. And just when people thought they had enough pieces of the story to understand what happened, another detail surfaced. A small detail, almost hidden in the footage, but powerful enough to change everything again. There might have been someone else involved. At first, most people missed it. The focus was on T.I. and King. But then a second clip surfaced online, and this one told a different part of the story. Unlike the original footage, which captured the chaos in the middle of the confrontation, this clip appeared to show what happened just before everything escalated. And the energy in this video was completely different. There were no sirens, no shouting, just tension. Thick, uncomfortable tension that felt like it could break at any moment. In the clip, King Harris can be seen pacing back and forth. His body language is tight, controlled, but clearly agitated. His hands move as he talks, his jaw clenched, his focus locked on something or someone off camera. And then viewers noticed it. Off to the side, partially visible, was another figure. Not fully clear, not fully identifiable, but present enough to raise serious questions. Who was this person? And more importantly, what role did they play? Some viewers claimed that in the clip, this unidentified individual could be heard saying something that sounded like, "You already know what this is about. Don't act like you don't." And that line sent the internet into chaos, because now the story wasn't just about a father and son anymore. Now there was a third element, a missing piece that no one fully understood. Within hours, speculation exploded. Anonymous posts began appearing across forums and social media platforms. Normally, these kinds of posts are ignored, but this time something was different. The details were too specific, too precise. One post in particular gained serious attention. It claimed that the confrontation that night wasn't just about behavior or attitude. It wasn't even about public image. It was about money. According to this supposed insider, there had been a disagreement earlier that day involving a deal, something connected to King Harris's growing independence, his connections, and the decisions he was starting to make on his own. Decisions that T.I. allegedly didn't approve of. And if that's true, then this wasn't just a personal disagreement. It was business. And business conflicts hit differently, especially when family is involved. Because now it's not just about emotions. It's about control, direction, and ownership. It's about two people with different visions trying to move forward in completely different ways. And according to these rumors, that disagreement escalated quickly. Voices were raised. Accusations were thrown. And at some point, things became so heated that others had to step in just to keep the situation from falling apart. That would explain something else people noticed in the footage. Right before authorities intervened, there were multiple individuals in the background. Some appeared to be trying to calm King down. Others looked toward T.I., almost as if they were waiting for him to take control of the situation. But by that point, control was already slipping. And then came another moment that pushed this entire situation into a completely different level. A verified account, someone known within the industry, posted a cryptic message just hours after the footage leaked. The post read, "Y'all really think this started tonight? This been brewing and it ain't even about what you think." No names were mentioned. No context was given, but the timing was impossible to ignore. And the internet did what it always does. It started connecting dots. People went back through old videos, past interviews, previous arguments, anything they could find that might explain what was really happening behind the scenes. And slowly, a pattern began to form. Moments where King Harris talked about wanting independence. Moments where T.I. emphasized discipline, structure, and control. Moments where their perspectives didn't just differ, they clashed. And now, with the new footage, the alleged audio, and these cryptic messages, people started to believe something bigger. That what we witnessed wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a breaking point, The moment where two paths that had been moving in different directions finally collided. But even after all of that, the story didn't stop. Because later that same night, another report began circulating. After the arrest, after the cameras were gone, after the public chaos had settled, there was a private conversation between T.I. and King Harris. No audience, no recording, just the two of them. And according to someone claiming to be close to the situation, it didn't go well. In fact, they described it as the worst it has ever been. Raw emotion, no filters, no holding back. And allegedly, things were said in that conversation that can't be taken back. Words that may have pushed their relationship past a point of repair. Now, no one has confirmed exactly what was said, but the idea that such a conversation happened is enough to leave fans concerned. Because if things look this intense in public, what does it look like behind closed doors? And more importantly, can this relationship even be fixed? Right now, the internet isn't just watching a viral moment. It's watching something unravel in real time. And as more people share their opinions, the divide is becoming impossible to ignore. On one side, there are those defending T.I. They argue that he's been trying to guide his son for years. That stepping in during that moment wasn't control, it was responsibility. That being a father, especially in the spotlight, comes with pressure most people don't understand. But on the other side, critics are pushing back hard. They're saying that control can sometimes feel like pressure, that constant expectations can create resistance, that maybe what we're seeing isn't just rebellion, but a reaction. And that divide is what's making this situation even bigger. Because now, it's not just about what happened. It's about what it represents. A clash between generations. A clash between control and independence. A clash between legacy and identity. And as this story continues to unfold, one thing is clear. This isn't over. Not even close. This story begins with a moment that on the surface seemed under control, but underneath, there was pressure, tension, and a quiet buildup that eventually changed everything. King Harris had already been a topic of discussion before, with many criticizing his behavior. Some saw him as rebellious, someone constantly pushing limits, while others viewed him differently. A young man trying to carve out his own identity while living under the shadow of a massive legacy. When his confrontation with his father, T.I., surfaced publicly, it stopped being just a private family moment. It became something much bigger, something the internet, the media, and the public couldn't stop analyzing. Almost instantly, the narrative split into two sides. On one side were those who believed this was simply a father trying to discipline his son, stepping in before things went too far. On the other side were people who felt that this moment showed something deeper, that control had already been lost, and what the world was seeing was the result of long-building tension finally breaking through. Right in the middle of this divide was King himself, not just as a participant in the situation, but as the center of a much larger conversation about pressure, identity, and expectations. As the footage spread, people didn't just react to what they saw, they started digging into the past. Old interviews, live stream clips, previous arguments, anything that could offer clues about what led up to this moment, began resurfacing. Every clip, every quote, every interaction was suddenly being re-examined, not as isolated moments, but as pieces of a bigger puzzle. What initially seemed like one night of chaos quickly evolved into a narrative about years of tension, unspoken expectations, and a dynamic that may not have been as stable as it appeared from the outside. Then the conversation took another turn. It wasn't just fans anymore. Industry voices began weighing in. Anonymous insiders, producers, and media personalities started sharing cryptic statements. One producer suggested situations like this are almost inevitable when fame and family collide without clear boundaries. A radio personality hinted that what the public was seeing might only be a fraction of a much larger situation. And then A verified artist posted something that shifted the tone even further, suggesting that people shouldn't laugh or dismiss what happened, because it was a clear example of what occurs when private issues spill into public view. These statements didn't provide answers, but they raised more questions, and that uncertainty fueled speculation. Suddenly, people weren't just reacting to the footage, they were trying to decode it. Who was really at fault? Was there more happening behind the scenes? Were there details being intentionally kept quiet? The lack of clear information created a vacuum, and the internet did what it always does. It filled that vacuum with theories. Soon after, media outlets picked up the story. What began on social media turned into headlines. Articles framed the situation as a deeper look into family dynamics, questioning whether the public image of unity and strength was hiding underlying instability. The story spread rapidly, moving from blogs to mainstream coverage, and with each new headline, the pressure increased. This was no longer just a viral clip, it had become a full-scale public narrative. And yet, despite all the attention, there was one thing missing: any official response. Neither T.I. nor King Harris addressed the situation publicly. No statements, no clarifications, no attempt to control the narrative, just silence. And that silence only made things worse, because when people don't have answers, they create their own. Theories multiplied, some grounded in logic, others completely speculative, but all contributing to the same thing: growing uncertainty. That uncertainty kept the story alive. It continued to evolve, to spread, to grow into something bigger than the original incident. Because now, it wasn't just about what happened, it was about what it meant. What did this say about their relationship, about their family dynamic, about the pressures of living in the public eye? Just when it felt like the story had reached its peak, when it seemed like every angle had been explored, a new twist emerged. A clip surfaced, different from the others. It wasn't loud or chaotic. It was quiet, almost unsettling in its stillness. According to the account that posted it, this footage was taken after the arrest. That alone raised immediate questions. How did someone get access to it? And why release it now? In the clip, King Harris is seen sitting alone in what appears to be a holding area. His posture is completely different from what people had seen earlier. No aggression, no defiance, just stillness. For a few seconds, nothing happens. Then someone off camera says something, unclear, barely audible, but enough to trigger a reaction. King slowly lifts his head, and what people noticed in that moment shifted the narrative once again. Instead of anger, many viewers believed they saw something else: regret. Real, visible regret. And just before the clip ends, he quietly says something that quickly became the most talked about line in the entire situation. This wasn't supposed to happen. That single sentence changed everything, because now the conversation shifted from reaction to intention. If this wasn't supposed to happen, then what was? Was there a plan? Did something go wrong? Was this truly a spontaneous explosion, or part of something that spiraled out of control? Those earlier theories about private deals, hidden tensions, even the involvement of others, suddenly came back into focus. The idea that this situation might have deeper roots gained momentum, and just as that speculation reached a peak, another claim surfaced. This time, from an account alleging insider knowledge of what happened after the incident. According to that post, discussions were happening behind the scenes, serious ones. Not temporary measures, but potential long-term decisions. The claim suggested that people close to T.I. were considering creating distance, not just privately, but publicly as well. Whether that meant fewer appearances together, reduced public association, or something even more significant wasn't clear. But the idea alone was enough to shake fans. Because up until this point, no matter what controversies arose, the image of family unity had always remained strong, solid, unbreakable. But now, that image seemed fragile, like something that could crack under enough pressure. And if those claims were true, then this wasn't just a viral moment. It could mark the beginning of a major shift. What made it even more intense was the continued silence. No denial, no confirmation, nothing to slow the momentum of speculation. And at that point, the silence itself became part of the story, louder than any statement could have been. Now the internet is left with questions more than answers. Is this the moment where the relationship truly begins to fracture? Or is it just a temporary storm before things settle again? Was T.I. acting as a father trying to step in at the right time, or reacting too late to something that had already gone too far? And what about King Harris? Did that final clip truly show regret? Or was it just another piece of a story that the public still doesn't fully understand? One thing is clear, this situation is far from over. Every time it seems like the full story has been revealed, another layer appears, another detail surfaces, another question emerges. And right now, the story continues to unfold in real time, unpredictable, unresolved, and constantly evolving.